Welcome everyone to our summer lunch and learn, the first session in a series. I'm Prairie Walkling, a Master Gardener Field Specialist based in Rapid City. Looks like we have kind of a small group today, but I know some were asking about recording and still maybe some coming. So today we're going to talk about Event Planning 101. And it will be recorded and posted to YouTube, and I'll send that out when it's ready. And you can type your questions in the chat box, or we have the Q&A open. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little question mark, and so you can send questions or comments either way. And today our presenters, thank you for being with us. I know you're both busy, and so thanks for making the time today. We have Dr. Kristine Lang and Cindy Jungman. And I'll tell you a little more about each of them. Oh, and I'm going to share my screen too. All right. So Dr. Kristine Lang is a South Dakota State University assistant professor and Extension Consumer Horticulture Specialist based in Brookings. She holds a PhD in horticulture and sustainable agriculture from Iowa State University, and her research focused on sustainable vegetable production. Her horticultural career has included working in private sector, university, and nonprofit organizations across 4 Midwestern states. And Dr. Lang works with citizens across South Dakota to empower master gardeners, celebrate public gardens, champion local food, and cut flower production, and address herbaceous plant questions from aster to zucchini. And many of you also probably know Cindy Jungman. She's been a SDSU Extension Master Gardener for 25 years. She served with the Prairie Potters Master Gardener Club in Pierre for 14 years, and now belongs to the Minnehaha Master Gardeners Club. Cindy is a past president of the South Dakota Master Gardeners State Association, and more recently, she served as an ex officio member of the Advisory Council and as director on the Minnehaha Master Gardeners Board of Directors. Cindy chaired the Minnehaha Spring event from 2018 to 2025, and she's attended the majority of annual state updates and has provided budgetary expertise for the past 5 state Master Gardener updates. So welcome to both of you. And just I guess before we get quite into our discussion, many master gardeners, hosting events is something that we do a lot as master gardeners to help educate the public. So we have spring events that often happen in March and April. We have plant sales, which can be fundraisers. Those often happen in May. And then throughout the year, we have workshops, demonstrations, farmers market or event booths that we do, and garden tours as well. So those are some of the events that I know I saw like one intern. So some of you might still be kind of learning about what events that master gardeners do, and it kind of varies by club, but those are some examples. And then this is just a quote this is on our National Master Gardener website, that Extension Master Gardener volunteers extend our educational reach, and we couldn't do everything we do without them. And they have a demonstration garden at their state fair, and at this one event alone, Master Gardeners help educate thousands of people. So I would say in South Dakota, we're talking more about hundreds of people, but it's still a lot of people, and that you're extending our reach through your events, and we appreciate that very much. So we'll get started with our gonna do like a panel discussion podcast type format today. So Cindy, we'll let you address this first. Tell us, what types of horticultural events have you hosted in the past?
Our Minnehaha Master Gardeners Club has hosted this, what we call the spring event, Gardening with the Masters, for quite a few years. This is definitely our premier educational event. It's an all-day event. We usually have 4 speakers or main sessions. Our most recent attendance was 275 people. Another quick and easy event we really like to host is Masters in the Garden. We hold that several times a year. These are pop-up events where individuals open their gardens to the public to share the successes and challenges in their space. We get sometimes very good turnout, sometimes not as much, but ranging, I'd say 30 to 80 people. We also host monthly tours of our teaching garden at the Mary Jo Wagner Arboretum. In addition, we hold horticultural classes at Mary Jo Wagner Arboretum, including a 4-part course on Vegetable Gardening 101. We do a garden tour every other year, and we have co-hosted a number of state updates over the years. And then, of course, we do seminars and presentations upon request, or schedule them with local libraries or whatever.
Thank you. Kristine, do you have anything to add?
I sure do. I think I'm going to walk through kind of the calendar year, but first, I just wanted to call out, like, I really like that quote from Purdue, and I bet we're into the thousands as well, Prairie. I just want to share that. I'll just share with folks, from 2021 to 2024, the SDSU horticulture team, so field specialists and state specialists, for a departmental review, we had to add up all of our event attendees, and based on everything I could find from everything we've touched, whether it's garden hour or on-farm events or webinars, etc., we were up to 7,300, so 7,300 people from 21 to 24, which was really exciting. So what are some of those events? I'll kind of walk through a calendar year so I don't try not to miss anything. Events that I'm directly responsible for or collaborate on include things such as the South Dakota Virtual Vegetable Short Course, which is usually a 4-part webinar series that happens in the evenings in January. And we get between 300 to 400 people who have been registering for that one. And the target for that one is really commercial specialty crop producers and gardeners who want to learn more about vegetable production techniques and kind of mirroring the research and having some farmer speakers. Usually in February, things are a little bit quieter. We might do a pop-up webinar series or just kind of a very specific educational topic. In March or April, and I'll talk more about this one in a moment, but we have started hosting what we call Cut Flower Camp, which is a full day intensive hands-on workshop for people to learn about cut flower farming, as well as learn floral design. So we have florists who work with us on that one, and that's been a unique event that typically sells out. As we turn the calendar into April and May, we're gearing up for Garden Discovery Festival, which was an event that Sydney Trio and I kind of brought back to McCrory Gardens because Christina Lind had run it in the past. And that one involves, coordinating with educational exhibitors, thinking about tours, making sure it's really child friendly. And we've had years where we have 150 people, and we have years where we've had almost 400 people come through for that event. As many of you know, if you've been paying attention to Prairie's emails and my emails and all of the things, but summer is typically on-farm field day season. So depending on what grant funding I have and what projects I can feature, I really like working with South Dakota farmers and gardeners to do events outside of campus and go to different parts of the state. So this year, I worked with someone in Bruce, I worked with someone in Sioux Falls, and I collaborated with another organization for a tour that was going to be in Alpena and Woonsocket and Forestburg, and we had to pivot it just to Alpena for weather impacts, which I will talk more about in a little bit. Our big star event that we just ran last night is our annual Specialty Crop Field Day. And I'll be telling a few stories about that in a moment. But that really is field tours and educational exhibits. And then things kind of slow down for a little bit, but I work with a much bigger team of extension professionals and other partner organizations, and we host the annual South Dakota Local Foods Conference, which is probably the thing that is most similar in terms of size and planning and looking ahead to what Cindy is sharing when you talk about the spring event, because we have, honestly, the spring event for Master Gardeners usually has more attendance than our local foods conference, but it is probably the thing with the biggest moving parts, and we have a lot of committees to pull that event off. And then we've kind of closed out the calendar year and we're back to starting the loop over. And at that point, you're rinsing and repeating and trying to remember everything you did last year. So I'll just sneak in a piece of advice, and I bet Cindy would say this too, is, take great pictures of how you laid out the room, how the exhibitors were set up. I'm really mad because I didn't take a picture of how I laid out my event tent last night, and I'm not going to remember next year, and I'm going to be annoyed with myself. So like diagram things, write things down, especially if it's things that you do year over year. Keep things in digital folders so that you can pass it from person to person. Just having those just like I encourage you to keep records on your farm or in your garden, keep records of your events. That's really helpful to look at what you've done in the past to help you plan for the future.
I really like that tip. And we use Box, mainly. And Amy kept some very good records from year to year, so I can look back at what was the email that I send for this, to the interns about. So that's really helpful, those records, and for lots of events and things that you do. I did see a question in the chat that kind of pertains to this topic. I'm going to ask Cindy to help me with this one. Do Master Gardeners work the Sioux Empire Fair?
This year, the Master Gardeners will have a booth at the Sioux Empire Fair. That is not the case every year, but this year, yes, we will.
Okay. Yeah, and we definitely do at the state fair. Every year I've been here anyway, we have a booth at the state fair, and I think we reached about 500 people at our booth last year. So that's an email came out about that, and that is, if you are near Huron or like to go to the fair, that's certainly an opportunity for some hours. Can interns serve at that booth in Sioux Falls, Cindy?
Yes, they can. We've had a sign up. It's all set, and they had a chance to sign up though. Yes.
Okay. And yes for the state fair as well. All right, we're going to move on to what is the best event you've hosted and why did it go so well? Do you want to start, Cindy?
Well, definitely our best event has been the spring event. People can glean so much information in one full day they learn so much, and it's a really good public event because our records show about 2/3 of the attendees are non-master gardeners. So we're really bringing in the public for this event. And I guess I think the reason it's so successful is because we put a lot of time and effort into choosing our speakers and topics so that they're broad and interest a wide variety of gardeners.
Thank you. How about you, Kristine?
And I will just say, I agree with Cindy from a speaker perspective that that's a very well-run event, and it's an easy one to be a speaker at, if that makes sense. Which from a speaker perspective, you know, there are events that you might get asked to speak at that aren't well run and don't go well, and you kind of have in your head like, well, if they ask me again, I wouldn't say yes. But I you know, so many of the events that the Master Gardeners, I've never had a Master Gardener event where I'm like, I wouldn't say yes to that again. Let me put it that way, like for all of you. It's usually been with other organizations. I think my best event, it's hard to pick because I've been, you know, creating so many, you know, everything's kind of new for me still. So they're all kind of my baby and special. But I think I'm going to pick Cut Flower Camp. And some of the reasons I picked that one is similar to what Cindy said. I like that we run it for a full day so that people get more information. I know it's not always popular, but we have a pretty tight registration limit in terms of the number of people we allow. It's usually between 20 and 30. And that's mostly space constraints. And we're still kind of perfecting that number to, you know, for what fits in McCrory Gardens and what might fit in a different venue. But I think it keeps it kind of intimate. And it's a space where we really encourage networking and communication. And it's a space where you have people who are doing on-farm activities as presenters, and you have florists, which are two very different business and educational perspectives. And it's really fun to get those people in the same room because that doesn't happen very often. And I think the other reason I say that's one of my favorite events is there are people who have told me, I have started a farm since I've come to Cut Flower Camp. I've started a farm because I've come to Cut Flower Camp. And that, you know, in extension, and maybe I'm under more pressure as a faculty member, but I have to be able to demonstrate impact and change. And it's the reason I always, you know, bombard you guys with the evaluations. I know many of you do event evaluations for your activities. But the ability to say, okay, because people engaged in this activity, they actually did something different is huge. And I don't know that I can say that about all of my other events. And maybe it's only 2 or 3 flower farms that have started because they came to Cut Flower Camp. But in a state like South Dakota, where, you know, not that many years ago, I could count on one hand how many flower farms we had. That's a big deal. So I think just something to be thinking about for all of your events is like thinking about, you know, some of those impacts that, because I think a lot of what you do is really impactful and you maybe just need to measure it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think we do have we will talk about evaluation a little later too, but to think about, yeah, because they went to your event, what changed or what may have happened as a result of that? Yeah. Okay, so kind of switching gears, what is the biggest event snafu that you've ever dealt with?
Well, from my perspective, it's one that I don't believe we'll ever see again, but that was when COVID hit. We were right in the middle of registration for the spring event, and we made the decision very quickly to cancel the event, but we still had to refund over 80 tickets. I think the better the planning, the less chance of having a big snafu.
I'll just jump right in and say I agree with planning and stupidly clear communication, like over communicating. my event snafu has nothing to do with anything that happened for an SDSU activity, but it still was a very good learning opportunity. Long story short, a friend of mine from another university, her and I were in charge of hosting a bus tour for a national conference where people signed up for the tour, and we were going to go from Botanic Garden to Botanic Garden to Botanic Garden. One of the gardens had a restaurant. They catered box lunches. Awesome. So Heather and I thought we were on the same page. So from my perspective, I was making a simple lunch registration form to email to all of the attendees with the lunch options. And I was communicating, I had communicated with the caterer to get the lunch options and what it was going to be. And I was going to collect, here's the number of lunches, what types, gluten-free, And then I was going to pass it to Heather because she had the financial side of things, and she was going to place the order and pay for it. Well, we both, communicated about the things. I passed the thing off and said, are we all good to go? And she's like, yeah, we're all good to go. And in her mind, good to go to her meant like, oh, Kristine's got it. She's got the order. She's paying for it. Good to go. So long story short, we get to that botanic garden. I go in, I'm like, hey, we're the group with the 40 boxed lunches. Just want to check in. And they're like, what are you talking about? And so Heather and I both communicated in such a way that we thought the other person had totally covered and like actually physically placed the order, and neither one of us had physically placed the order. And that could have been a really, really bad day. But by some miracle, this restaurant, they like whipped together 40 box lunches. We only had to stall for like 30 extra minutes, and they got it cranked out, and most people had no idea something was wrong. And Heather and I were both like just absolutely sick to our stomachs about it. So just like really over communicate and be very explicit, because I think we both must have just been talking in a way that like was vague enough that like, oh yeah, it's covered, it's good. When I should have been like, hey, I've got the registration ready for you. I know you're handling the finances. Here's the order. I need you to place it. Or Heather should have been like, oh, I'll just give you the financial information. I need you to place it. And we both just missed it. And I think we're both pretty proficient communicators. So life happens. But yeah, we felt really dumb about that one for a long time, even though it ended up working out pretty well.
So communicate well with your co-planners or co-organizers. And I thought you were going to say like over communicate with your attendees. I thought that's where you were headed, but that also is can be helpful too. Just
yes.
Nope. A lot of communication.
The attendees did the homework. They signed up for their lunches on time. That was for the first time ever. That was not the issue.
Yes. And I do see a question from Josh and he asks, how do I make sure I know when Cut Flower Camp and the other events are? Is there a master calendar?
There is not a master calendar, but we're going to have a question about event promotion in a little bit. So stay tuned, Josh. Cindy and I will share more.
Okay. And Josh, I hope you get the Master Gardener emails. If you've, changed your email address or anything, let us know. That is kind of our primary form of communication. And for now, that's kind of the main way we're communicating those. So, and there's events on the SDSU Extension website as well. That's another way to find those. So, all right. What are items on your event planning checklist, Cindy?
Well, there are a lot of moving parts when you go to plan an event. And just keep in mind that it's not one person doing all of these things. This is spread out. But my list is about a dozen or more items. You start with establishing your planning team. You set your date. You obtain your venue. You have to develop a budget early on. Then you start establishing your educational topics and securing speakers, developing your event schedule, arranging catering if it applies. Finally, you set your ticket price or registration fee and you open registration. You define and you fill your worker roles, advertise on social media, website listservs, and so on, and follow up regularly with the venue, the caterers, your speakers, and your workers.
This is also, go ahead, Christine.
I was gonna say, and I agree with that list entirely. And I think the things I'm gonna add to this one are like weird things, most of which that might apply to the outdoors. I'll start with an indoor or outdoor one. Be mindful of, are there speaker travel costs? Are there speaker stipends? I often have speaker stipends in grants, or like if someone's hosting an on-farm or an in the garden field day, because there's, if they're volunteering as a master gardener to host that thing and it's part of their hours, that's one thing. But a lot of the folks I'm working with are taking time away from a farm business to set up for a field day or an event and kind of clean up the farm and get ready. So, be thinking about kind of the budget and the cost of what you're going to pay speakers, and be really clear in how you communicate that up front, so that there's no hard feelings when they get done and they're like, oh no, I thought, you paid me $500 and I was expecting 5,000. That's never happened to me, but just like be clear. Things for outdoor events. Being prepared for wind, are you going to anchor tents? Do you have a lot of handouts, and do you have paperweights? Just those simple things. Do you have things that are going to blow over? I love many of our partner organizations and my extension colleagues, but I've seen a lot of handouts blow away, and I just want to give everyone, like, maybe Kira can make us all SDSU extension branded paperweights, because I honestly think they would be a big hit. So Kira, we can chat more about that later. Especially for outdoor events or things that are at people's homes or at people's farms. Are they okay with people going into their home to use the bathroom? Or do you need to rent a porta potty and a hand wash station? That's really important to think about. Whatever your event is, think about mobility. Are there ways for people to get into the auditorium or the space and be comfortable? Cindy does a great job of this. For the spring event, they reserve, rows that are for people who have limited mobility. I sometimes address it at field tours of making sure there's chairs for people who need to sit when everyone else is standing. Or last night we had a golf cart for anyone who couldn't walk from field site to field site so that they could get a ride, things like that. Having really clear signage like turn here and park here are all really helpful. And I think that's if your event's in a weird spot in town that's hard to find, or it's like, okay, where am I allowed to park? Just being really clear about like signage. All of the things that go with outdoors, having a first aid kit, bug spray, sunscreen, like making those things available, lots of drinking water. Again, I'm just going to take kind of the outdoor event perspective for that one. And be mindful of, who your helper team is. Because I'm sometimes like, oh, I can run registration by myself. But pretty soon someone has a question and I can't. And so then I'm asking Robin Butterbaugh to help me. And she was amazing last week and this week. And just having helpers for like setup and just like not trying to do too much yourself. And Cindy's already talked about that team approach, but being mindful of the time it takes to do some of these different things and have your team identified.
Awesome. Very, very good tips and info there for indoor and outdoor events, which we may be having both of those.
Yep.
So, wind. Did you talk about wind too? And we, yeah, at the event we tried to set up canopies the night before I have helped at the Harvest Festival that they have, and they all blew into the barbed wire fence and we're stuck in the fence. So we learned you cannot set up the canopies the night before. There's just too much. The weather here where we were just did not allow for that. So you learn as you go. You learn every year how to do it a little better. So what is your typical event planning timeline? How far in advance are you starting to plan and get things ready?
Well, definitely the larger the event, the further out the planning timeline goes. We set the time or the date and the venue 11 to 12 months in advance of the next event. And that makes it a little difficult because you're locking in your date so far in advance. You don't know what other groups might be planning for that same date. You just try to get the word out so that they know that is when your event is. 6 months in advance, our planning team is in place and we're beginning discussion on educational topics and speakers. And right along with that, with probably 5 months, we are engaging our speakers, getting commitments from them, arranging fees and travel if we need to, and doing all of that. The event schedule itself and the program are at least 3 months in advance. Also, catering has to be that far in advance because you need to know those costs to set your registration fees. Besides the venue, catering is your biggest cost when you have an all-day event. The registration, we open 8 to 10 weeks prior to the event. And the reason we do it so far out is because our clubs have a lot of events going on, and we just want to get our word out there that we're having this event and have people start signing up. The final 2 weeks before the event are really hectic. You're coming up with final catering numbers, you're preparing name badges and meal tickets and printing programs and sign-in sheets. But you also need to confirm your workers again, follow up with your speakers, get the venue set up the way you want it. So the last week or so is really, really busy.
This is reminding me of a lot of things I need to do for the update still. So thanks for those reminders. Kristine, what would you add?
I would add, do exactly as Cindy does. I think this is a fantastic timeline that alleviates so much stress. I'll pick on myself mostly. I feel like when I'm planning extension stuff, I compress the timelines way more than I should. And I think if I was to reflect like on my on-farm field days and things this summer, it can be like, oh, we want to do the press releases a week before the event because we want it fresh in people's minds. But that can be a real gamble when you're doing things like food. Because all of my events these last 2 weeks have involved some sort of food and some sort of catering count. And I'll just share that one of our field days ended up on Kelloland News. About 48 hours ahead of the event, I had already given the caterer the numbers and I could refresh Eventbrite and see people signing up. And so I called my caterer in a panic, like, can we add 30 more meals? So that was a little bit stressful. And sometimes with those free events, your walk-ins versus your no-shows offset each other. But I think if you can try to do things like a big news promotional push, if you're going to work with Kelloland or Dakota News Now or anything like that, trying to get that so it happens before your catering cutoff is really helpful. And again, Kira from our extension communication team knows that sometimes I'll get an event idea like, oh, we're just going to do this little pop-up webinar series. And really, even for an online event or a webinar series, you really should give yourself 6 solid weeks of promotion which means I really should have it to my communication team 8 weeks in advance. And Kira's probably laughing because she knows I rarely meet that deadline. But give yourself time to promote the event so that you're not stressing about attendance, whether it's free or paid. And I really do agree with Cindy. The bigger the event, the timeline she's laid out is perfect, and I'm going to tape it above my desk to hold myself accountable.
Awesome. So how about sharing your top 3 lessons that you've learned since you've started to plan and host a lot of events? What are your top 3 lessons or tips?
Well, for me, by far the biggest key to success is your team. Having a good team who's dedicated and willing to go that extra mile. I also think it's really important to be flexible and open to all ideas that your team brings forward, and be willing to try new things. And a big one is don't bite off more than you can chew. It's tempting if you've got a venue that seats 500 people to open it to 500 people, but do you have the manpower to run such an event? You can always go a little bit bigger next year or whatever, but it's really hard if you overextend yourself. So keep it manageable.
Great tips. Thanks.
And I'm going to piggyback on, I agree with all of Cindy's advice, especially, again, these last 2 weeks. I wouldn't have survived these last 2 weeks without a really solid team. Piggybacking off of being flexible and open to all ideas, it can be painful. It can hurt your feelings. It can make you question, like, oh, well, I thought I planned a good event, but then this one person said that this was stupid and they didn't like it. And, so I think what I'm trying to say is use your evaluation forms, read them, take them with a grain of salt. If one person is really mad about one specific thing, it might have been that they had a very bad experience, and you might want to see if you can follow up with them, because if someone has a bad experience, they can go and tell everyone else about how terrible your event is, and none of that might be true. They might have just had a bad day. But you also need to take evaluation responses and suggestions for changes and go, oh, you know what? You're right. I should have had the bathrooms closer to the tent. That was a long walk. Or, you know what? I really do need to change up the schedule. This doesn't make sense. So I think that's honestly been the biggest lesson for me, because it all feels personal. I had someone leave my event last night saying, this was so much better than last year. And I'm like, thank you, but that also hurts my feelings, because did you hate last year? But I'm just going to take the win. And at the end of the day, upon reflection, he's right. The way I ran the schedule this year made way more sense than it did last year. Like, he's right. I can't, you can't let your feelings be hurt, and you just have to make adjustments. I think whether it's indoors, webinar, outdoors, sound is important. If you have a speaker who talks a million miles an hour, and this comes from, I know sometimes I'm a fast talker, but ask your speaker to slow down. If you are doing an event outdoors, it can be really, you get 10 people or more, and it can be really hard to hear. And folks will say, I'm a loud talker, I don't need a microphone. And I will actually say, I get that, but I get complaints about this. And if I don't use a mic, I need you to use a microphone. So just making sure sound is good and people can hear. And the whole like, speak up if you can't hear me, is no one's going to speak up. So you need to take the initiative and realize that, if I can't hear or people look frustrated or disinterested, you need to do something different with your sound. And then I think last, a good moderator, a good facilitator, a good person to shepherd the thing along and make sure you stay on schedule and your speakers feel comfortable, and people if there's time, can ask the questions and the questions are being repeated. And I am far from the end all be all for the facilitator, but it's something I've tried to take really serious, especially with on-farm events or with student speakers where people are a little shyer or new at it. Like, you just got to make sure that that person feels comfortable and they're not afraid of the audience and they feel comfortable talking and answering questions. So I think facilitating the conversation for an event can be really, really important. Or again, having a good moderator like what Cindy and the crew does at their spring event that keeps the event fun and peppy and moving right along.
Yeah, or we sometimes call them an MC,
Yeah.
moderator. Yeah, all those great tips. How about speakers? How do you select your speakers for events? You are on mute, Cindy.
I'll say for our group, we start out talking about the topics we would like to cover, and then move on to, well, who can cover these topics. I will always say, look to SDSU Extension. They've got a wealth of resources, experts in pretty much every field, and there's usually no charge to have them speak at your event. Other organizations like NRCS and South Dakota Soil Health Coalition also have expert speakers at little or no cost. Don't overlook the knowledge and talent of your own master gardeners. Gosh, we have just so much knowledge there. And when we use our own resources, our own master gardeners to take part in these events, they always get great reviews, especially in panel discussions, which I'll talk about a little bit. But professional speakers can be a real draw to your event. And we've taken advantage of that a few times over the years. Just be aware that they're pretty spendy, especially when you add travel with, I think mileage is like 70 cents a mile now. It doesn't take much to add up those travel expenses. Also be reminded that if you pay someone $600 or over for their services, you are responsible for issuing them a 1099 form and filing it with the IRS. Not all clubs know that, so just be reminded of that. Plan well ahead because speakers are in high demand. I would say avoid overusing the same speakers or topics. From year to year, even across clubs. Again, I said panel discussions are always popular. We found that if you have a panel speak on a topic and allow 15 minutes at the end for questions, almost always we have to stop the session or they would go over. And finally, one thing I really recommend is to get your speaker arrangements in writing. The date, the time, the location, the topic. We use email to confirm arrangements with our non-paid speakers, but we actually use a speaker engagement agreement for paid speakers. That way it's all in writing, there's no question on what we've agreed to. So try to get that in writing.
Thanks, Cindy. Go ahead, Kristine.
And I will just say again, I'll start with a little bit of as someone who speaks a lot, I love having all of those details in writing because when I confirm that I'm going to do an event, I lock it into my calendar. I take speaking invites on a first come, first serve basis. I can no longer do every single Saturday. So whoever gets me first gets me first. But when folks like Cindy or other clubs or other I'm speaking for the University of Minnesota at their horticulture night tomorrow night in Morris. So if anyone's going to be there, I'll see you there. Look for me under one of the tents. But that's another example of, once we settle on like the topic and the description and where I'm speaking, I copy and paste all of that information from my email into my work calendar. And that way, when I start preparing for that event, I'm like, okay, what was the exact title? Because there's nothing more embarrassing than having the wrong title on your PowerPoint. Or what did I specifically say I'm going to cover or do or demonstrate, so I know what supplies I'm gathering and all of those things. So I love, as a speaker, I love having those detailed emails. I love knowing if you're providing the laptop or I need to bring my laptop. Those are just great things to know. I think the 3 things I'll add, because Cindy's list is phenomenal, is if you're bringing forward a speaker, hear them speak. Either you need to have heard them speak, someone in the group needs to have heard them speak, or you need to have watched a YouTube or a webinar or something where they have spoken. Because just because someone's really good at what they do or writes really well doesn't always mean they're a good speaker. So I think that's my advice, because I've run into issues with that in the past, not for anything really SDSU extension, but for another event, it was a bit of an issue where the speaker ended up being kind of a dud, and it made me look like a real dummy, and it made the attendees think I was a real dummy. And it just wasn't a good experience. I totally agree. Set expectations with your speakers for, this is the topic. This is the area we want you to cover. Make sure they really understand, like, okay, this is an audience of master gardeners, or this is an audience that has never gardened in their life, or this is an audience of children. Because you speak to each of those groups of people differently based on their expertise and understanding. And it can be helpful. And I will say my one exception to this, make sure you hear them speak, is when I do on-farm field days, they have a little bit more of a conversational, informal vibe. And I usually have a sense of like, is this farmer comfortable speaking or not? Am I going to have to ask them more questions to kind of like make sure they feel comfortable? So in a case like that, where you might be working with coaching a newer speaker, or maybe a newer club member wants to speak on a topic, is, I think there's ways to like have new speakers speak, but, give them some talking points, give them some suggestions of like, or something like this, where Prairie gave us questions, give them questions to answer, because that might help with the flow of speaking. So I think there's opportunities to have new people speak, but someone needs to, not boss them around, but maybe like help them generate ideas, and they'll realize, oh, I have a ton to talk about. So I think those are my additional tips for selecting speakers.
Well, and now we're going to talk a little bit about promoting events. I know Kristine mentioned a press release. How do you promote your Minnehaha events, Cindy?
Well, Facebook is definitely our #1 and most successful method of promoting our events. Once you set up the event itself in Facebook, it's important to continue regular posts about this event to keep the interest flowing. People hop in and out of Facebook. You want to draw them in with regular posts. Share your Facebook event with other gardening Facebook groups. You get so much more exposure if you share with groups such as South Dakota Gardening or something like that. And SDSU Extension will always share it on their Facebook page. We also we have a MailChimp mailing list that we use to announce our events and promote them. And that the mailing list comes about from people signing up to receive information about our events. We always have a sign up at the event. And if you can, use your local media. sometimes they're willing to help and sometimes they're not, but you know, you at least have to help. And we found that the small local newspapers like to cover these events, and sometimes local radio, depending on where you're at. I know Prairie Potters has used their local KCCR radio to promote their events, and I think they've got really good support from them.
All great ideas. Kristine, anything to add for promotion?
I would say for me, it always starts with making, I don't make it, but I request it and the team helps me. They'll make it a shareable event or add the registration on the extension events page, which I'm going to drop for everyone in the chat. I also do Facebook pushes. I'll do email listserv pushes. I now keep at every event registration, I ask, do you want to receive our newsletter? Which if anyone in this group doesn't receive my newsletter, you should, because that's where I put all of my events. But I also will keep a direct contact email list, and I will blind carbon copy so that if someone replies, they don't reply to 300 plus people. But I now have a list of over 300 people that I direct email. And I'm still kind of coming up with the secret recipe for, okay, the event registration opens, and then I email 2 weeks out, and then I email the day before, like trying to figure out what's not obnoxious, but what's helpful. So I think direct email is helpful too. And honestly, the best way to promote your event is host a great event the year before so people want to come back. Or host, you know, I hosted 3 events last week and I kept talking about my event last night at those 3 events. And I did get some people who came because of that, because they liked those other 3 events. So all it takes is one bad experience for someone never to come back. It takes lots of little good experiences and interactions. There's definitely science on this. I don't have the numbers, but you know, we all know like something bad happens and we're like, I'm never eating there again. Whereas like someone might need to tell you, hey, that new restaurant is great 5 times before you actually go. And so there's something to be said about event promotion in that respect too, is like building a good reputation.
Yeah. I'm learning some good tips too here. And we are we're kind of wrapping up here. So if you do have questions, please send those our way, and we're gonna keep going here. And we're gonna talk about evaluation and how do you do evaluation and how do you use that information?
Well,
Cindy,
Kristine really hit the nail on the head earlier, so I won't say much other than the evaluations give you feedback not only on the event you just held, but on ideas for future events. We have a list at the end of every evaluation, and we really go through that to decide what to offer in the future. And the feedback isn't necessarily just on the speakers or the topics, but you hear about the venue. It's too hot, too cold, the food, so that you can adjust in those areas as well.
how about you in evaluation, Kristine?
It's funny you ask. I have one right here. First, make it silly easy for people to do. You know, like give everyone a piece of paper as they get in the lunch line or as they're grabbing their snack. Have a paper form and also have a QR code so that they can do it on their phone or in paper. And I like to ask questions, you know, what should we change for future events? What was your favorite part of this event? But I also like to ask questions about how many new things did you learn at today's event? Will you try something new because of something you saw or heard today? Will you share what you learned? And I've started asking a new question now that my events occur over and over. Have you attended one or more on-farm field days hosted by SDSU Extension in prior years? And if yes, Have you used what you've learned to try something different? Again, those are kind of those impact questions. It's taken me a long time of taking other people's really good evaluations to kind of frame those questions. But something to think about is, did people learn something? Are they going to tell someone else? And are they actually going to do something different because of your event? Just some things to think about if we could do a whole nother chat on impact evaluation, but yeah, those are the things I'm starting to think about more and more.
And we are going to take the leap this year and offer a QR code, like you mentioned, like an online. We'll offer the paper evaluation at the annual update in Peer. And then we decided it's time to try the QR code if people could do it on their phones or things like that to try to get some more back.
Yep.
And yeah, so we're gonna try that too. And then I know Kristine has some things to say about this. So do you want to start with this one and tell us about how you plan for weather or contingency plans, especially because you do so many outside events?
Sure. I will say that now I don't have the wording in front of me, but I try to word all of my events that outdoor events are rain or shine, except in the event of an active thunderstorm watch or warning. Because we can't have people getting hit by hail. We can't have people getting struck by lightning or getting a tent blown into their face. Those are all really bad things. So I spend a lot of time watching and stressing about the weather. I was really stressed the night before our campus field day because I thought we were going to get a derecho. And it was kind of like, I'll just deal with what we need to deal with in the morning. We were fine. The weather looked beautiful. We got halfway through our event. It started at 5 last night on the Brookings campus. And we were doing a walking tour with 8 different stops and student speakers. And I could see the sky was getting dark. So I subtly pull up the radar while someone's speaking, and it's like, oh, it's going to go south. And even as a moderator, I said, like, oh, it's going to go south. We're going to be fine. But then the storm started to build around us, and I could, basically at the point, if you can hear thunder, that lightning's close enough to be dangerous. And so we were starting to hear small rumbles of thunder. We got people, thankfully, the tour route just worked. We got people into the high tunnel. I had my last 2 student speakers speed up. And I basically had to have a conversation in my head with what are we going to do, because we still had half that we hadn't served the ice cream. The exhibitors hadn't gotten to speak. We had another set of tours we wanted to give. But I had to make the decision in that moment, like, no, folks need to grab their ice cream. They need to grab one more handout from the exhibitors, and they need to get in the car. And again, that's where having a microphone to speak up against the wind and say, this is the plan, folks. I'm so sorry. Grab your ice cream. Thank you for coming. Get in your cars, get home safely. And then basically everyone from Extension just threw everything under the tent, which was still kind of a giant lightning rod. We were maybe out there longer than we should have been, but the participants were gone, and we very quickly cleaned up, and then it downpoured, and it was really, really nasty lightning. So sometimes you just got to make the call and monitor the sky. And I didn't get to pass out my evals, so I'm going to send a really nice email today. But you just have to be so mindful with weather, and we're seeing more and more in the summer that it can change very quickly. So you have to have someone, whether it's you or another team member, who is your weather aware person and is ready to make the tough decision. And I hate ending an event early, but I hate the thought of a lightning strike hurting someone even more. So that was my story from last night.
Yes, the safety first.
And I know
And
Cindy has the opposite perspective from the other season.
go
Well,
ahead, Cindy.
I'll just say that in the winter, we try, if at all possible, to keep the show going on, because being in Sioux Falls, a lot of people can get there, but also you've incurred all the costs. and we have a break-even event. So if we can't have the event, the club has to foot those costs. So in the winter, we just, and we have never had to totally cancel because of weather. We've had to adjust for out-of-town guests before.
And lastly, our last question that we have is, how can clubs work together? And I have a few ideas to share. And then if Cindy or Kristine have other thoughts to add, please feel free to do so. So one idea is we could work with the advisory council on this to maintain a list of speakers that who is Minnehaha having this year, who is Pennington having this year. So we're all communicating and we're not double booking a speaker. And we could, along those lines, we could get a list from SDSU Extension of available speakers that we have and topics that they are available to speak on, which I like that idea, and I'm not sure if we've done that before, really. And there still may be some topics that they would be able to, that might not be exactly on the list, but it would be a good starting list, I think. And even some of our newer staff and things like that, I could see that being really helpful. And clubs could, at the advisory council, we could kind of be talking about speaker ideas and topics and recommending them. People we've heard, like Kristine said, it's better to book someone that you've heard and are not going to surprise you with something kind of out of left field, or if they're just not a very engaging speaker. Then co-hosting events is a possibility for some of our clubs that are closer together. And we have seen this kind of work at the update, where clubs help with the silent auction, or they help with one part of the event, which kind of frees up the other club members to run their committees. So these are all things that we could talk about at our next advisory club meeting, and I think could help all of our clubs with planning events. So I know we're at time. I did just want to, I will give Kristine and Cindy time to give their closing thoughts, but I did just want to tell you we've got 2 more coming up. Next Wednesday with Robin Butterbaugh about creating presentations. Love to have you at that one. And then on Wednesday, August 13th with Amanda Bachman and Sarah Ogan, another Master Gardener, and they'll be talking about tabling and answering questions. So thank you all for being here today. And Cindy and Kristine, do you have any closing wisdom for us?
No, thank you for having me.
Okay. I think, this was a lot of information, and it's very easy for me to go to someone else's event and be like, oh, they're doing all of these cool things and I need to change all of these things for my event immediately. Like Cindy said, add more attendees incrementally, make changes incrementally. If you're getting told like this thing that happens at your event is terrible and I'm never coming again, I would prioritize changing that first. But take everything we said today, with a grain of salt. Think about what works for you. And I think my process has been over the last 5 years to kind of slowly, I didn't perfect event planning overnight, and I'm far from perfect at it. So, and I bet Cindy would have the same feeling. So again, document things you want to change those next year, see how it goes. So be kind to yourself and be flexible. And I guess just keep an eye on the sky, because I don't know if the radar in South Dakota is helpful anymore.
And I just want to say thank you to all the clubs for the events that they do have and the work that they put into them. It is many, many hours that they're spending putting these events together. And, you know, I've learned from going to their events, and I am not a perfect event planner either. So, yeah, I just want to thank all the clubs for the events that they have and the work they put in. So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, Kristine and Cindy.